Hello everyone, welcome back to a new Harstem Hour. Today we're going to be having a look at how to copy people and how to get better through copying people. And in order to do that, I decided I'll get a replay of the best foreigner, my man Reynor, or the second best foreigner if you think Cyril is better, or the third best foreigner if you think Clem is better, but definitely one of the top foreigners. Second place at the latest BlizzCon, so technically second place in the world. And a lot of the time people ask me like, hey, how do I actually improve at this game? What would be a good way to go about it? And I always tell them, hey, just copy a top player, do exactly what they do, but just do it worse, and then practice that, benchmark yourself and go from there. And then they'll try to copy the player, but it doesn't work because they don't quite know what to copy exactly. Now, of course, I'm assuming you already have the basics down. So you have your hotkeys properly set up, you have at least decent mechanics that you can execute a basic build order. And that's exactly where we're gonna start as well. The first thing you want to do whenever you're trying to copy someone is to copy someone's build order exactly, second for second. So you just get out pen and paper or write it on your PC or your second screen, whatever. You just write down exactly, okay, the hatchery goes down at 16 supply, which is at this timing. The gas goes down at this much supply, and that's this timing. And also try to pay attention to how buildings are built. So for example, something very common that Zergs do is that they rally drone number 17 to the gas and drone number 18 to build the pool. Now, this is very convenient because then you can continuously keep mining 16 on minerals. Makes it easier for yourself because you're just rallying from drones. And then you see the next rallies go to the extractor. This is the second step of the process of trying to get better at doing a build order and exactly copying it. Because a lot of the time people just have these things written down, but not actually how they're being executed. So that's also something that is important. So when I say you copy someone, you just try to copy someone as much as possible. And I really mean just every movement or every little scouting info. Try to not change too much, especially if you're not top 20, top 10 Grandmaster. Honestly, your ideas are probably just gonna suck. And if you get an idea that doesn't suck, it's probably on accident. It's better to just copy someone else, at least if your goal is to improve. Of course, if your goal is to have great fun, do whatever the hell you want. This video is probably not for you, but if you want to improve, try to copy someone as much as possible that lays close to your style. So it is completely possible that you think, well, I don't want to be the macro monster like Reynor. Perhaps you want to copy Bly a bit, for example, who is someone who's way more aggressive, or some of the Koreans who have way more aggressive tendencies. But otherwise, try to copy these guys in their build order, in their style. And that's, I'm going to show you exactly how far we can take that and how deep you can go with that. So another thing that is quite common in CVT or just for Zerg in general is, so you got your your 18 gas, your 17 pool down, you rally into the gas, then the moment your hatchery finishes, you start pulling out of gas. Now, these are all details that at the lower level are of course not that important, but nothing is happening yet. So it's just good practice to do it anyway. If you're gonna try to copy something, try to do it as optimized as possible, especially if nothing is happening. Well, if you're under attack by 5 Hellions and a Reaper, I don't care if you pull out of gas, that's not that important. But in the first 2 minutes, not much should be happening, and you should be capable of copying this. You get your 4 links, you get your queens, you send your drone towards the third base, and then at 30 supply, you should be building this hatchery. And hopefully not lose a drone like my man Reynor did here. Don't copy that, alright? That's the one thing. Mistakes you don't need to copy. Then after the hatchery, you straight away get the queen. And then we're going to take a look at exactly how does Reynor hotkey things. Now, a good way to do that in a replay is in the options to have gameplay control groups on normal. Usually you probably want to have them on unclickable or hidden. I like to have them unclickable, but in this case, normal is the best way because then you can click the group and see what's in it. So we see right now, there's 3 groups for units. We're not counting the Overlord. And that's the links, the queen in the natural, and that is the queen in the main. And soon we're gonna see that Reynor differentiates not so much between the queen in the main and the queen in the natural, but more between queens that are free to move around and queens that are stuck at a hatchery, basically. So this queen in Reynor's control group mind is now free to move around till the end of time, basically. Because there's going to be a queen up here next. This one's just going to be focused on spreading creep. And then every queen that is not going to be in the group that is free to move around is going to be in the static group. And this group can be pulled, for example, in high emergencies, or if there's something happening over here, you can pull the 3 queens from this hatchery, and this hatchery, and the 3 queens can stay over here, keep spreading creep or whatever. So notice the creep tumor spreading pattern. Make sure that you know when the inject gets hit first, when the creep tumor gets built, that type of stuff, and make sure to not miss any real injects. Now, this is all pretty standard stuff, and from here on out, now the first interactions are truly going to start happening, because we have our 2 Hellions, we're going to have our Reaper. So up until this point, this build, if you just practice it enough, no matter what skill level you are, perhaps barring bronze players, you're going to be able to do this. The creep spread might not be as good. You might miss an inject, but you should be able to do this, as nothing has happened yet. And I'm not saying you're gonna load up a game right now and you're gonna be able to do this, but if you practice this 10 times and nothing happens, you're just gonna be able to do it. That's just how it works. You know, this doesn't require a lot of speed. You don't need 500 APM for this. You just need to do the right things at the right times. Like, you can do this, honestly, because nothing else is happening. And this is a great benchmark because of that. So you can time yourself at 346 or 340 for all I care. And you can say to yourself, okay, at this point, I have exactly the same things as Reynor. My creep is a little worse. Maybe my overlord spread isn't as good. I haven't been able to scout at all because all I can pay attention to is my early game. But at least you are going to be able to do this. This is very important, okay? Now, as a follow-up, we're going to continue looking at his build order, but we're going to be seeing it more in relation to his opponent's build order. This is why very often just having one replay isn't enough to truly copy someone, but it's going to give you a very good clue of their triggers, of what they're doing, especially if you're playing, if you're watching a reactive Zerg player, like Reynor tends to be. Now, of course, I can understand if you don't want to watch 30 replays to completely get the intricacies, and probably if you're below Grandmaster, it's not that important. Just knowing the basic reactions most of the time is just going to be fine. Important things, once again, is that we see this queen is being hotkeyed still in the main, and these 2 queens, these are going to be the roaming queens right now, are hotkeyed to a 3rd control group, which are going to be used just to push away the Hellions and the Reaper and focusing on spreading creep. On top of that, we also have a hotkey for our Zerglings, which very often we'll see if we take a look at the movement. By the way, once again, now another queen gets added. I'm actually a little bit surprised this queen is on a separate hotkey. I think it will be added onto this hotkey soon. Very often we see the inverse movement of these links to the queens. Inverse, yeah. So if we see the queens go over here to the top, these go to the bottom. If the queens go to the bottom, these links go to the top. So you always have something somewhere. Basically, that's the goal. Okay. We actually have a pretty tight setup here by Reynor, who now has two groups of queens. This is pretty high level stuff. Where instead of relying on his queen movement, he's going to be like, you know what, I don't want to move my queens around too much, and whenever you go somewhere, there's going to be queens to meet you. And I kind of like that play. Now, scouting wise, he hasn't been able to get too much done. He sees a depot wall over here, but he hasn't really figured out much of anything, and because of that, we're going to see relatively quick layer. This was 17 seconds ago, and a Baneling nest going down as well, forming a semi-wall over here. Perhaps with an Evo chamber, we'll be able to completely wall this off. This is for safety in case of armory builds, like Hellbats or any type of other all-in. Well, mainly just Hellbats, honestly. And in this case, I guess also some Infernal pre-igniter upgrade. So you got some extra upgrades here. Very important also to see how Reynor decides to get his gas. Getting gas timings is one of those things that is really important and is often overlooked as a big factor of the why people lose or win games, especially in the lower leagues. So we see second gas going down relatively quickly. At around the same time, the main base starts resaturating again. Now, whenever we look at engagements, we want to think about how is he controlling this control group wise, and how is he controlling this like micro wise, basically what are the moves that he's doing that make this fight good for him, and am I capable of copying these moves? Now we see he has a run by on the other side of the map, which might look a little bit risky as he doesn't really have all that much against the Hellbats here, and you can kind of see in this case that he got caught out of position, right? His drones, most likely a bunch of them are gonna end up dying here, and his main priority for now is going to be to make sure that the Hellbats in the main don't do much of anything. And note that now that he knows it's Hellbats, and especially with Blue Flame obviously, he's never fighting with the Lings against these Hellbats. These Lings seem to be an absolute last resort. He's mainly focusing on Queen movement, and Banelings is going to be the main focus of what he's doing. His Ling run by did good damage, which is nice. Probably pretty necessary as well in this game. Otherwise he would have been in some trouble. He's going to end up losing the third base, so of course reynor not perfect either. And he's going to be in a little bit of trouble. But look at how he takes this fight now. Just a lot of people would be like, oh damn, my third base went down, let me just run in with everything. The Drainer's still very patient, uses the queens to the maximum of their capabilities, sends forward a bunch of Banelings just to kind of scare his opponent, maybe force his opponent to split away, and then keeps chasing with the queens. You see, he's not wasting any Banelings. Now if we take a look at the control group setup, this is made possible by the fact that he has 3 control groups for units. So he has one for the queens that are chasing, he has one for the Banelings that are fake chasing, he doesn't really want to be using them, and then he has the Lings, which are just trailing behind and ready to pounce once there's only 1 or 2 Hellbats left, or maybe something else gets sent in, like 2 more Hellions over here. Then he's gonna have these Lings ready, or like the lone Hellbat pickup, basically. That's what the Lings are for. Now, this is actually a pretty tricky situation here for reynor, where his big queen group is caught on the wrong side, and he only has 2 queens on this side, and one of them isn't even hotkeyed, which actually is this one. So we're gonna see what his exact response is going to be here, and I think in this case it should be pulling away all the drones and burrowing the spore, and then from there on out he should actually be kind of fine. Clam doesn't unsiege this, and does kill a couple of workers, but not too many. Now, reynor follows up with a Spire. At this point, don't forget that the game is so weird that trying to copy the build order is completely useless. The moment any big interactions happen, copying build orders usually becomes rather useless. What you're doing in that case is just copying reactions, unit movements, and responses to whatever it is that reynor is seeing, which so far hasn't been an awful lot. All he knows is that there's 3 factories and Blue Flame Hellions. 30C goes down for Clam. We're of course focusing here on reynor. Continue spreading a little bit of creep. Couple of Banelings here on the top side. Spire going down. Third base going down. And just kind of mirroring that movement of the Hellions with the queens at this point. He's afraid of run-bys. He's afraid of probably just fighting these Hellions. I like that he has a couple of Banelings here on the top of the ramp as well. Because it's a surprise, right? The Hellions can't look up. They're gonna pop up and be like, oh, crap. That's a lot of dudes. The moment you have this many queens, you're not really gonna be able to be challenged by any number of Hellions, majority of the time. Okay, so we continue in this game, continue creep spreading. Now, we see Overlord spread happening. This is one of those things that I think shouldn't be extremely difficult either, especially if you got your early build orders down. At least the first 3-4 Overlords should be capable of being spread. Later on in the game, most of the time, people are gonna forget it, and that's okay. It's something that you'll learn over time that keeps increasing, but it's one of the things that you can focus on. Another important thing is when you're thinking about improving in general is that most of the time it is important to focus on a specific thing. Very focused practice usually yields way better results than kind of the shotgun approach where you focus on everything and you kind of do a little bit of everything. You'll very often notice whenever a Zerg, I'll notice it as well, when a Zerg has been playing, like practicing or thinking about the creep threat, their creep threat will absolutely explode in a couple of games, and then in the next games it might be a little worse because they focus on something else again. But just by practicing one skill very much, it's a lot easier to get that skill going, basically. So for Zergs that could be injecting, for TOS that could be continuous pro production and chrono boosting, and for Terran that could be building your proxy racks in the correct location. No, just kidding. Terrans can also just build SCVs. It's completely fine. Just worker production in general is very important in the game, especially in the lower leagues. After that, you could be thinking of things like map control, map vision, making sure you have you're taking correct fights. Don't forget, this is something that actually decides a lot of games, and it's something that I always dislike a little bit when people just say, well, you can get to platinum by just moving across the map and 200 supply of void rays. Well, yeah, that's true. I can probably get to high grandmaster. No, I can probably get to low grandmaster, just moving across the map, maxing out on whatever unit composition. That's not really the point. If your entire setup is going to be, I'm just gonna move, then once you hit platinum, or once you hit whatever league it is that you'll hit, you're gonna stabilize at some point, right? And that doesn't work anymore. Then all of a sudden you have no clue how to take fights whatsoever. So even though I think it's good to focus on one thing, I think it's good to focus on one thing per session. I don't think it's a wise approach to look at StarCraft and take one thing, in this case macro, and be like, okay, for the rest of my life, I'm just going to focus on increasing my macro. Because you kind of got to see it as a gradual skill where, like with most skills in life, if you try to improve in something, the first 50% are going to be by far the easiest to improve, because people you just get very quickly from 0 to 50%. That's easy, right? It's the final percentages that are very difficult to get. So it makes almost no sense that if you're only focusing on macro, like, you're gonna get a very steep rate of improvement. Obviously at the start you're going to be very good at macro compared to your peers, at least, because it's all you're focusing on. But then after a while, instead of improving maybe your macro by 5 or 10% a day, it's going to be like 1% or 0.1. Well, if you would focus one day on your fights, that's going to have a way bigger impact on your rank and on your overall skill level as well. And don't forget that you kind of get compound interest on improvement as well, in that the moment you improve, you start playing against better opponents. And if you start playing against better opponents, you get better faster. So getting as high opponents as possible is very important. You always want to play against people that are slightly better than you, ideally. Of course, you don't want to get demotivated and lose every single game, which is why I think ladder is a good tool for practice, because it tends to balance that out a little bit. If you just play custom games against a guy that's slightly better, you might go 0-15 and feel like, well, time to uninstall League of Legends and in some people in the mid lane. Like, this is the thing about, it's one of the things that actually has annoyed me for a while now, where people just ultra focus on, especially macro, I notice, is very common. And there's also, of course, the guys that micro their Reaper while floating 2k resources. I think it's smart that if you want to improve, to have dedicated goals for a day or for a certain session. You can have 3 sessions in a day, and in one session you can really focus on your Oracle control. Well, this is more high level. This is something I would do. I'd be like, okay, today my main goal is to never lose my Oracles in dumb situations, I would say. And then I really just focus on making sure I don't lose my Oracles. Now, of course, the rest of my foundations are really good already, so it's not like my macro is gonna slip, but I might hit my timings a little less tight. My Prism micro might be a little bit worse because of it, but I'm gonna improve the foundation of the Oracle micro, which is very important. And for people that are slightly lower level, you can have very many things. It could be map vision, you can have your macro, you can have the way you take fights, which are all very important to look at. And a lot of these things are copyable. I really think people underestimate how easy it is to copy top players in StarCraft 2 because we have full access to their control groups, which is a big part of how they work. We can see in real time how people respond to threats. Like if there was a drop right now, we would see exactly how reynor would deal with this. Would he send these 6 queens over there? Would he take some units from his main group and split them off? Or would he send his entire main group there, leaving perhaps this base more vulnerable? There's a lot of clues that we can get from watching the top players and seeing exactly how they respond to aggression or to turtling, see what their unit movement is like. Like even just following these mutalisks can be extremely helpful. Just focusing on a very small part of the play of a top player can be extremely helpful in your understanding of how to deal with certain situations. Now, of course, that doesn't mean that you should be copying the 1700 APM that freaking reynor has, because it's going to be impossible, but the general ideas behind it are what's important. And if you're trying to improve, you always try to strive for the absolute best. Like you don't want to, well, unless your goal is to be a cannon rushing scrub. I mean, in that case, you can just cannon rush your way to GM as well. You can do that. That's completely fine. But you're never going to get to the level that reynor is at, or that some of the Korean tosses trap is at. Innovation. You need a solid set of foundations and solid understanding of just how everything interacts with each other. And that was a very long rant. I'm sorry. Okay, so let's continue for a bit. Now, things start getting interesting here. Right now we have 5 control groups. We have, for units at least. So we have our queen group. We call these the roaming queens, okay? These are going to be for spreading creep, for perhaps if there's a tank push, we want to tank some tank shots with those, maybe even a mine shot. We have a couple of transfusers ready on these. All good. Then we have the emergency queens. These queens might be pulled if there's big pressure over here at the third, or if things go horribly awry. You might want to pull the queens into the fight as well. Okay, these are the backup. These guys are useless. Okay, technically we don't really want to be using them ever. We hope to not use this control group. Then reynor has a separate control group here for a run by, and he has a main control group as well as a mutalisk group. So that's a bunch of groups, and that sounds very daunting and it sounds very difficult. And that's okay. You don't need to copy it at once. What you can do is you can first start, in my opinion, the difference between having 2 queen groups or even just having 1 queen group, just roaming queens. You don't even need to hotkey these. And then from there on out, you're just going to build on it. Just incremental progress, pretty much getting to the goal where you can confidently use multiple control groups and know where your units are, know what's in them. And try to keep these things consistent as well. It's important to have the groups be consistent and not constantly be switching around. You don't want your group 5 to be 3 queens sometimes, and sometimes your run by, and other times the mutalisk. Try to have some logic behind it. Think about it, write it down, and then if you feel like something is wrong about it, change it. Change it on your paper. I like to use physical paper a lot of the time because it just feels more real to me than on a computer. Put it next to your PC. Just look, okay, where do I want to put my units? Where do I want to put my buildings even? I mean, for Zerg it's easy, right? They only need to really hotkey the hatcheries. Maybe you want to hotkey, I like to hotkey my upgrade structures. I see reynor doesn't at all, so he probably just clicks it. But you can think about these things, and then you can think, okay, well, what would make sense to put together as a Protoss player? Maybe a Forge and a Twilight. I mean, these are buildings that you don't use very often. You can tap through them. This is going to be very little interaction. It's nice to have them hotkeyed. And then you're thinking, well, if I put my Twilight there, I might as well put my Robobane Templar Archive. So I have a group when I play that just has all my upgrade structures. And whenever I need an upgrade, all I need to do is press that button and then tap to the right structure until I can get the upgrade that I want. And I like that. I don't need to leave my screen at all. So in my mind, my mouse button is like that. Then I have a group for run-bys. I have a group for my Prism. I have a group for Oracles. I have a group for Templar, and I have a main army group, as well as a group for Tempest, of course. So I have a couple of control groups, but when I started playing, I had 2 control groups. No, when I started, I had 1 control groups. that's not plural, I had a control group and everything was in there. A moved across the map. Then after a while I was like, these freaking Templar are really annoying to have in my main group. And I started putting my Templar group separately. Group 2 was Templar. Then I think Oracles got introduced. I was like, well, I kind of want to have Oracles on a separate group. And I got a separate group for Oracles. Then I was like, well, Prisms are pretty good. I want a separate group for Prisms. And you can kind of build on it like that. And a lot of the time what happens when you're changing something in your control group setup is that it will feel bad for a bit. And this is a concept that is called investing in loss. You're going to lose more for a little bit, but there's going to be a bigger payoff later on, hopefully. There is one caveat there, in that don't make it too complex for yourself. Very often people, I know some people have like 8 unit control groups. You can't control that. Try to have it make sense. Think of units that really need to be separated, and think of it like that. You see a lot of the time the pretty high level guys don't have much more than 2-3 control groups for units, and then maybe for special forces stuff like the roaming queens, which are not used as much, you know. You could have your oracles in the lake in there, or just for revelation tagging, that type of stuff. I have no clue where I was going with this. Big Baneling hit. Okay, so you see Mutalisk just flying around basically. Some creep being pushed forward as well. A little bit of a Baneling run by being set up, so there's no combat shield yet for Clem. I kind of forgot that, I think. And it's pretty cool to just, when nothing really is happening, to see what Reynor is doing. So right now, nothing is really happening. And what he's doing is he's setting up run-bys, he's setting up, well, he's trying to get more creep out, obviously. And he's trying to keep some type of control with these Mutalisks. Just making sure he knows what the movement of his opponent is. Because there's 2 major moves here for the opponent, right? He can go over here, in this little path, or it can go over here. And these Mutalisks, for now it seems like their task is just going to be figuring out exactly what the movement is, not really so much focus on doing massive amounts of damage. You see, he's not trying to poke into bases so far, he's just trying to control that movement of Clem, making sure that he knows, hey, what's going on? And he said, yeah. Okay, sorry. Now he feels maybe more comfortable in his defensive position, that he's like, alright, I think I can maybe harass a bit with my mutas. No, pulls it back again, goes back home. Meanwhile, his main setup here is going to be Lingbane Mutalisk. 2 upgrades on basically everything. Gonna go up to very high gas count as well. Notice the resource collection whenever you're playing a composition. Some compositions require more gas, some compositions require less gas. Try to keep track of how many drones the top players get, how many gases they get, how much is on minerals, and just by doing things like that, it's actually going to be quite helpful for your game. I mean, if you're playing a charge in as a Protoss, you don't need 4 gas on your, you know, you don't need gas 3 and 4 on your natural. You're gonna be fine with 2 gas. Hell, you might even want to pull out of some of the gas in your main, because you're just gonna be building zealots that are minerals. So, not quite as useful. I feel like there's a lot of Protoss reference in this server replay. That's okay, because it's a more general concept that I'm trying to get through. It's just really how to improve in general, and especially by looking at better players than you. That's really the main goal. So you see 2-2, very passive Reynor. Now this has something to do probably with the map as well, where it is kind of difficult to get attacks going. Now we're gonna see an actual fight, and this is interesting to see, because the macro so far has been good, all of that stuff I'm completely down with, you know. But this is where it gets interesting, because me as an inexperienced Zerg, I see a lot of units, I'm a Protoss player, I look at this, I zoom out and I go, alright, what do we do here? And I think, select my entire army and I A-move over here, and then perhaps I split a little bit to the side to dodge some mine shots. But what we see a lot of the top Zergs do, which is probably wiser to follow than what a mediocre toss does, is they send in small groups of banelings again and again and again, meaning that the mine shots are maximum gonna hit a couple of units. You see, this 2 mines have fired, and in total they have 2 kills shared between them. I mean, that's not that high. And once again, we see a couple of links in the front, maybe tanking any potential mine shots, and then banelings going in. Really trying to mitigate any potential splash damage that Clem has. Meanwhile, while he is slowing down this push, basically, because he's not jumping this push, he's not stopping the push, he's slowing the push down. He doesn't want Clem to move forward too fast, get in better position, clear more creep. Meanwhile, he is doing damage on the other side of the map. And this does 2 things. Counterattacks always do 2 things. One, it does potential damage, potential game-ending damage. It can force your opponent to attack into you, which is almost never a good idea. Like, usually careful pushes are better than very quick pushes, unless you're hitting specific timing. So it can do that. But also, it forces either rallies, warp in, just reinforcements that could potentially be helping the fight to stay home. And because a lot of the time counterattacks are more mobile, you get these situations where, in this case, the Muralisk are forcing, well, this is about 20, 25 supply to be staying home. And then the Muralisk can join the fight before this army can join the fight, which means all of a sudden Zerg is working with a 20 supply advantage. Now, this is one of the things you want to be looking at. While, of course, reynor for a long time was just actually trying to do damage, but now he feels like, okay, damage can't be done anymore. So now I want my ultimate army strength. I want my army to be the best that it can possibly be. And I want my opponent's army to be the worst it can possibly be. And I think reynor is going to get exactly what he wants. Because if his Muras fly back and these units haven't joined yet, he's going to be able to get maybe a major fight before 20, 25 supply joins his army. And here we go. He pushes this back with relative ease, actually, even though it did look kind of scary before. And if these 2 Thors were with the army, yeah, it would have been a lot harder. But reynor prevented that by doing this Mutalisk harassment. And really, the way he fought wasn't all that special. I mean, it was good, but it wasn't like he did any insane flanks from 7 different angles. He just was patient. He counterattacked, sent 5-6 Banes forward every single time, and just like that he fought. And it's very nice to see someone play like that. It's enjoyable. And then once again the Muras go ham, like they immediately, right? No time, no delay. Goes into hive. He feels safe, has a good worker count, 94. It's a very high worker count. Now, there's a couple of concepts that might be difficult to grasp when you're seeing something, so I'll just tell them. The moment you're playing with a high worker count, you usually want to be taking trades. And when I say you want to be taking trades, you want to be taking semi-efficient trades. So anyone can trade, but having an efficient or semi-efficient trade is what's important here, because Zerg is going to be outmining the opponent, especially in gas. You see that? Gas count is going to be very, very high. He's just mining 10 gas. Probably even going to be going up to 12 gas at some point. So as a Zerg, you want to get trades that are probably slightly worse for the Zerg than for the Terran, but in such a way that at the end of the trade, you have more money and more supply. And you do that by just having a better eco. And usually the more workers you have, the more important it is to do more trading. The guy with less workers doesn't really need to trade, because his army is just going to keep growing. He can stay in defensive positions, and eventually, usually, the guy with the bigger army tends to win if no trades are happening, right? If you get a good setup push, a stabilized push, and you're up for the army supply, yeah, it's going to be very well. So we see reynor trying to poke holes in the defense at every side possible. And you see the synergy between the Banelings and the Muras here, really just very high speed aggression coming out of reynor. Of course, he continues his regular cycle. So, by the way, another cool thing you can do, we're just gonna go back to the start for a bit, is to figure out a cycle. And when I mean a cycle, I mean the order in which someone does things. Why can't I just load onto here? Yeah, there we go. So you can just go first person of someone, and then you can see, okay, what are the things that are happening when a pro is playing. And you can exactly see from second to second what is happening and where the priorities lay. And you can see, okay, so he's constantly basically checking his bases, make sure that his, his injects are on time. He checks his scouting overlord at this part of the game, and you can see the things he is prioritizing in the first 3 minutes. And you see that a lot of that is very macro focused, right? That it's basically just going back and forth between bases. He looks at the screen, make sure that the Reaper doesn't get in or anything like that. But the most time spent seems to be with just making sure that the macro is going to be okay. And you can even see the exact cycle. Like every single time he just goes back to the main, then he goes back to the natural, and he goes back to his queens. Back to the main, back to the natural, back to the queens. Now, if you go later on in the game, we can most likely see that these priorities are going to be shifting. We're probably going to see a lot more unit control because the armies are bigger, the stakes are way higher. So we see still quickly switching through bases with camera hotkeys. We see at least some macro, and then after that we're just going to see creep spread and a lot of unit movement and just trying to find holes in whatever it is that our opponent is doing.
Mineral field depleted.
Plus 2 muras are so sick. I really like plus 2 muras. They have big damage, man. Holy crap. So you see, for the past 15 seconds, it really only has been here. Okay, this is cool to see as well. But this was a little move that might be a little bit difficult to copy just straight up, but it's cool to understand. So here we have an army consisting of Lings and Banes, and in Reynor's head the Lings are not gonna amount to anything here. I agree with Reynor. You see this army, you know there's probably gonna be a couple of mines. Marines are just gonna die to splash, or they're just gonna die to the Marines, but most likely just to splash. So what he does, he tries to connect with some of the Banelings, and the way he does that is by most likely control clicking. So he just basically A moves, and then he control clicks the links back. And you can control click in groups. So imagine you have this group, and you send it here, you right click over here. You can do two things. Either you can control click the links and then send them back, or what you can do is you can, wait, where are my Banelings? Here they are. You can A move over here and control shift click out the Banelings, and then click the links back. And then the Banelings just go by themselves. I'm not actually sure what he does. I think... I wish I could go slower even. Okay, yeah, he control clicks away the links. So he just control clicks, left click on the links, and then right click back. And then the Banelings kind of start moving by themselves. Boom. Cool, no? Then he tries to get a couple more Banelings, and you see that the way that he attacks remains very, very similar. Just sending Bane by Bane forward, and the moment he is under siege, his first thought is, okay, I want to pick up the reinforcement line and force units to stay home, and then maybe do some damage, and eventually come from two sides. And that's really just the entirety of his play. That's his entire game plan. And we figured it out just now. I didn't know that. I don't watch a lot of ZVT. I watch a little bit of ZVT. I have some knowledge of it, but I didn't know that that was exactly what he wanted to do. And it makes sense. You want to be stopping rally pushes, and whenever Clem here is taking a position, the first thing that Reynor does is go behind. Stop reinforcements, make sure that the rally goes over here, and then we take a fight, preferably from two sides. Yeah, he's right here in planetaries at this point. That's so good, man. It's ridiculous. It's actually ridiculous. Makes no sense. Wait, where's the mutas? Here we go. Yeah. Mutas have to defend a little bit, blah, 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 go back home. Now, this is a tricky situation once again. We're gonna be seeing how Reynor responds to it. And perhaps we're gonna see some even... Okay. I was gonna say, I hope we're gonna see some higher level concepts. So this is one of those things as well, where a lot of people are very keen on defending bases, especially in positions where it's not possible. And especially in late game, When you have a bank, it's not that necessary. But even in earlier stages, if you're thinking fourth or third bases, a lot of the time these bases, you're just better off sacking them and saving the drones. Losing a base is bad, okay? It's gonna cost you about, if you have a full mining base, about maybe 1,000 minerals, 1,100 minerals, who knows, something like that. Not including having to rebuild the base, but just on lost mining time. But it's still better than losing every single drone that you have there, because that's also going to cost you a crap ton, and it's also going to cost you a lot of mining time, but it's also going to cost you larva, and it's going to cost you production time. It's going to... it's usually worse, because you can't even... whenever you lose mining time, it is not instantly money that you lose, but you lose potential income. But when you have to rebuild 16 workers, that is money you instantly need to spend to even get it back. So usually it's worse to lose workers. And also, very often, when people aren't in position to defend their base, what they do is they take an out-of-position fight in order to try to defend the base, which is undefendable, or just take a massive loss in efficiency. So you see here that reynor wanted to go in. This was a knee-jerk reaction, what he almost did. You see? His knee-jerk reaction almost took over. It's actually pretty interesting to see. His reaction was like, alright, I want to A-move into this. But then his brain took over and was like, no, wait, that's not correct. So you see him go, you see him go, you see him go. Here he's like, okay, there's a lot of crap. I'm gonna lose this base. And he's like, let's go. And he looks at it, he looks at the fight, he judges it. He's like, no, wait. This is a position where there's hardly any creep. I have no vision of how far back this army gets. I don't know how many mines is in here. And there's a decent amount of marauders that can tank my banes. Do I need to take this fight? He looks at the situation and he says no. Goes back. Correct call. 100%. Might lose 3-4 workers though. It's okay. These units are now out of position and then reynor jumps. Just like that. You see? Absolutely beautiful play. Ah, the kid is so good, man. I love the kid. Platonic. Adrenal glands. Ultraless cavern. 32 links. 8 banelings. Once again, here come the mutalisks. Finding an opportunity. So he loses a base, trades a base. It's not always going to be possible, but he does find an opportunity. Mutas are going to force his opponent back, and while he's doing this, most likely he's going to be trying to spread some creep on both sides again, making sure that that gets back up. Just gonna zoom through this a little bit, like the zoomer that I am. Here come the drones that were from over here. We're still on 93 workers, which is nice. There's still a bank, which is also nice. So overall, not a bad position for reynor, right? It's not ideal, but the next push for Clem needs to be very far away, and Clem is only on 4 base, which means that now bigger counterattacks can be a thing that might happen. And we see a lot of freaking links together with these mutalisks. I'm not a massive fan of how this went, honestly, for him, but it's an attempt, I guess. Gets a couple of mines. I'm usually not a massive fan of these almost base trade like counterattacks, unless you're very sure you're going to be able to break a base. But in this case, that wasn't possible, and he just lost a lot of links, lost a little bit of momentum. And sure, he forced a little bit of supply at home, but not more than he would have with just the mutalisks. So I'm not quite sure if this was brilliant. And now I feel like there might actually be some pressure on reynor to perform here. In that I feel like he almost needs to clear this base. If he doesn't manage to clear this base, he probably actually will be in a little bit of trouble. Let's go back to the control group, by the way. Just have a quick look. So he still has Baneling Ling in one main group. Then he has a small group here, which I think could be potentially used as a run-by group. It's still in the main group as well. And of course he has a group for mutas. And now all he has left, actually, he has no roaming queens. All he has left are these 3 queens. That's pretty sick to see. This was also interesting how he took this fight, right? Want to have another look at that real fast? So we can see clearly that his goal is going to be to break this base, which is a fair goal. Like I said, units lost in favor of the Terran, as always, so you don't want an eventual split map scenario, and this base could potentially incur a split base scenario later on in the game. Like maybe this base even goes to the Terran eventually. So it's important for reynor to make sure this doesn't stabilize and become an anchor point or a launching point for Terran pushes. Now what he does is he goes in here, and instead of just right clicking with everything, you see he splits off part of his army to make sure that Clem starts losing DPS on these units by having them to move back while attacking this base. So he kills 16 workers and he forces it. Ideally this would have been a planetary already, obviously, but wasn't the case. That's okay. Each okay. 50 Mutalisk still going ham.
Under attack. Mineral field depleted.
Adios.
Mineral field depleted.
I love that. That was the burrow just forcing a scan. It's a little bit of money, not that much, but a little bit is always better than none. By the way, note that I showed it last week as well. I think one of the things that is really almost universal in the top players is that they tend to not take any big fights. Especially the Zergs and the Tosses. And what I mean by that is that you almost never see them just collapse on their opponent. They're almost always sending in small forces while doing counterattacks, or small forces while whittling down the army, and then when they know they're gonna crush the fight, that's when they go. But they don't want to fight on even footing. You almost never see someone just run into his opponent and go like, alright, it's time to kill you now. No. Almost always they try to basically scrape off units on every single side. Like, I'll try to kill 5 Marines here. I'll try to take out 7 or 10 Marines here. And then once you have 15 Marines less, and I only lost 6-7 Banelings for that, I'm gonna jump on you. And even though all these things are happening within a very small margin, like it's not gonna be massive, it all kind of adds up over the course of a push stabilizing or something like that. Banelings moving forward. That's a beautiful engagement. I wish the Mutas were here. The Mutas should have been here. This was a mistake. This is a reynor who knows he's won the game and tries to do too many things at the same time. If the Mutas were here, you clean this up and this base is completely gone as well. 100%. This is splitting his attention thin for no real reason. You see this very often when people are ahead, is that they start harassing, expanding more, and taking fights at the same time. So try to stay vigilant. But I mean, in this case, it doesn't matter. He's so far ahead by using his tried and true method of stopping reinforcements in the way that he's been doing. And this has been a fantastic game to watch, honestly. Even though it's been a Zerg replay, you can still learn a lot from the way that he engages, the way he just does things in general. I think is always important to see. I really do think so. So yeah, we can just skip through the end. It's not that important. Man, 48 minutes on a 20-minute replay. I can't actually remember what I was going in with this. I watched the replay and I was like, I feel like I should talk a bit about copying pro players. So that was the initial goal. But now I feel like it's a pretty decent episode about just improvement in general, mindset for anything. I'll need to think of a thumbnail and a title, but I'll figure something out, guys. I hope you did enjoy this 50 minutes of the Harstem Hour. We're getting closer and closer. One day we might actually hit it. I'll thank you all for watching. Don't forget to smash like. And I'll see you all next time for a new episode of whatever the hell it is that I decide to do tomorrow. Love you all. Bye bye.